Well, hello, everyone, and I'm so excited to bring you this January AATH conference update. It is 2018 now, so we're not talking about next year's conference anymore. We're talking about this year's conference. And I'm so excited to let you get to know a little bit about my very good friend, Steve Sultanoff, who's going to be one of our keynoters. He is an AATH legend, so most of you who are members already know him, and really he doesn't need any introduction. But for those of you who might be new to the organization or thinking about coming to our conference, I wanted to give him a chance to tell you a little bit about him. First, before he does that, I just want to say personally, Steve has been so impactful for me in many ways, but one of the key things for me was as I got to know the Association for Applied and Therapeutic Humor organization, I was really excited to discover Humor Academy, which is a 3-year training program where you can get certified as a humor professional. And Steve was such a fundamental part of that learning experience to really understand what therapeutic and applied humor really means and how we can implement it in our own lives as well as those people that we're working with. So I'm so excited that he's going to be one of our keynotes this year. So welcome, Steve.
Thank you, Heidi. I'm thrilled to be here.
Thank you. So I was hoping you could just share maybe a couple of minutes of your background. I know it could take a lot longer than that because you've done so many things, but a little bit about your background and what led you into the study and teaching of applied and therapeutic humor.
Okay. Well, I'm by trade a clinical psychologist, and what brought me to therapeutic humor actually started in 1985, and I attended not a therapeutic humor, but a world-renowned conference. It's known as the Woodstock of psychotherapy. And at that conference, they had a session with 4 of the most famous theorists in psychotherapy, and they were talking about humor. And the room had about 500 people in it listening about humor. And I was thrilled. But I was really disappointed because these experts in psychotherapy knew nothing about humor. So that was my first introduction. I've never been somebody that's particularly funny. My childhood friends would say that maybe I was creative and clever, but definitely not funny. But I was always interested in humor. So the 1985 conference came and went. Very shortly thereafter, about 3 or 4 months, the Laughter and Play Conference was here in California, and I attended that, and there was a session on humor and psychotherapy. Once again, I was thrilled, and I went to that session, and those people knew about humor, but they didn't know about psychotherapy. So I'm thinking the therapy people don't know humor, the humor people don't know therapy. Here's an opportunity. Then 1987 hits, and I learned a model of psychotherapy. And in learning that model, the model just talks about something very simple, which is therapists try to change how people feel, how people think, change their physiology. We do that with medications and changing behavior. And I had this epiphany that humor changed all of those. And I thought, wow, this is exciting. And so I started looking for literature, and there really wasn't much. And one day, strolling down the hall at the university, I saw a flyer, and that flyer was for, at that time, the American Association for Therapeutic Humor, which, of course, we've now changed to the Association for Applied and Therapeutic Humor. And they were having a conference in November in Chicago. And I went to that conference, and that really solidified the beginning of my interest in therapeutic humor. And at that conference, I met some of the people that today are still close friends and still very active at AATH.
Yeah, well, I think that's such a good thing for people who may not be familiar with the group to hear is that one of the really exciting things about this particular organization is we do have access to researchers, and we talk about theory, and we get into a lot of the meat of why this really works and the practical application. So I think for myself, I know going to the first conference, I was hesitant because I'm not funny. And so it was like, I don't want to be put on stage. I don't want to be put into a situation where I'm uncomfortable to, maybe do laughter yoga, which wasn't really something I was interested in at the time. But I was so delighted to find these kind of different groups of people using humor in different ways and understanding these different dimensions of humor, which we learned from you in Humor Academy, and how it affects how we feel, how we think, and how we behave.
Yes, exactly. And AATH really is the premier organization that helps people understand the therapeutic impact of humor.
And so can you tell us just a little bit more about that? Because you've been really a very strong advocate for what therapeutic humor really means. And as you mentioned, there's play, there's laughter, there's creativity, there's comedy, joke telling, there's all of these things people kind of associate in their minds with humor. So what is therapeutic humor? Just to kind of give people an idea of that. And I know you're going to talk more about that at the conference as well.
Well, therapeutic humor itself is humor that is targeting our health and wellness. And so it's targeting how we think. And we know that a great deal of our health and wellness, and in fact, emotional distress, is to a great extent based on perception. And very much of humor targets perception. It helps us change and see the world in a different light. It resets us as we change our negative thinking to more positive thinking. So humor changes that thought process, and that's part of therapeutic humor. And then therapeutic humor is also how humor changes our emotions. That's a separate category. It changes thoughts, but it also can directly change emotion. For example, you cannot experience distressing emotion, things like anxiety, depression, anger, and humor in the same moment. They can't coincide. They don't exist together. Now, granted, after experiencing humor and you're anxious and the anxiety goes away for a few minutes, it may come back, sure. But we know that the experience of humor directly changes emotion. So those are two of the impacts of therapeutic humor. So when we look at definition, it also changes how we behave, and it also changes physiology. Most of the research is in physiology, in which case we look at humor triggering laughter, and laughter has many physiological benefits, which certainly will be explained at the conference.
Right.
So when we look at therapeutic humor, it's humor really that targets any of those four areas for a positive physiological or psychological change for an individual. And for me, what makes humor therapeutic also is that it's used by the person offering the humor in a purposeful and intentional way to be helpful. And that would differentiate us from comedians. Comedians are funny. And in fact, what they do is probably therapeutic. Going to a comedy show, I'm sure, is therapeutic, but it's not the delivery of therapeutic humor.
I love that. You read my mind. I was going to ask you that question, and I thought, wow, we could talk about this for 45 minutes, and we don't want to do that. But well put and concise. And I would think too, if I want to experience therapeutic humor, that I could self-induce that state by using it with that intention, or does it really need to be, do you think, between two people to be therapeutic?
Well, that's a great question. And initially we think about, us as therapeutic providers, we're trying to provide therapeutic humor, but I see no reason why an individual couldn't purposefully and intentionally use humor for therapeutic purposes. I think many of us in the field encourage people, whether it's clients, patients, whoever it is, to use humor to feel better or to think differently. So I think an individual certainly can learn how to use the humor in healthful and wellness ways.
Yeah. Well, and that goes so perfectly with the conference theme, which is resilience. And so I think it's important for people to understand, if you're in a situation where you are being therapeutic, if you're in healthcare, I mean, there's so many different professions where we're trying to help other people change their mindset, change their emotions, all of those things. Certainly this will be beneficial also for you just as the individual to learn the skills and the tools and just how practical it can be to have your own improved resilience. And then we have a whole nother dimension we won't go into at this point, but some of the other discussions we have may be more around the applied humor in things like business and marketing and sales. And there's all sorts of other things that we really like to kind of explore. But I think in this particular discussion that we'll be having with you in this keynote session, we'll really be talking mostly about that. And your talk is on Friday morning, which I'm so excited, April 13th, Friday the 13th. We're also going to be having our Comedy for Caregivers event that evening. So it's going to be a super packed, awesome day. And your topic is survival of the wittiest. So can you give us just maybe a little smidge about what that's going to be about?
Yes, survival of the wittiest is the use of humor to create resilience. And what that's about is when we think about resilience, we can look at resilience from a physiological state. We have some disease and we recover from it. But my talk's going to focus on the psychological. And where we have antibodies for our physiological world, we also have psychological antibodies. And these antibodies are in us and functioning all the time. And when we're faced with the stressors of the psychosocial environment, these psychological antibodies are challenged and maybe depleted. And resilience, or using humor for resilience, is to recover those antibodies and or maintain a solid group of psychological antibodies ongoing. And I'll be talking about ways that we do that, and you and I have already talked about that just now a little bit with shifting cognition and shifting emotion. But the goal will be to look at how we bolster resilience and how we recover from events that deplete our psychological antibodies.
Oh, I love that. Oh my gosh. If you're not excited hearing about that, I don't know if you're excitable if you're watching this right now, because that sounds awesome. I can't wait to hear that. I also want to let you know I'm going to have to interview you so we can go longer into this for my Stress Mastery podcast, because it's exactly the type of things that we're talking about. So this conference has a lot of really great information. I want to say again that it's going to be helpful for you as a provider if you're in a therapeutic space, but also with business skills, communication skills, and a lot of other elements throughout our time together. It's going to be April 12th through the 15th. And if you're interested in Humor Academy, I also really want to encourage you to check that out. It's an awesome 3-year program where you really get to go in depth in this content. So you can get more information about all of this at AATH.org. And if you're watching this before January 31st, I want to really encourage you to sign up right away, because we have an early bird discount that will end January 31st. And if you're watching this after that, I'm sorry, but sign up anyway. So Steve, thank you for your time and your expertise. This is going to be an awesome session. I'm so glad we've got this to kind of start us Friday morning, getting our own mindset right for the time that we're going to share together. Again, the conference, I don't think I mentioned, is in San Diego. I expect we're going to have great weather here. Steve is also in Southern California. We've got a great little chapter that gets together from time to time for the AATH group. So it's going to be a lot of fun. We hope you will join us. And Steve, I look forward to seeing you in April, hopefully before.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be a great conference.
All right, everybody. So AATH.org for more information. We hope to see you there. Thank you.